The FedLife podcast is presented by Serving Those Who Serve, a fiduciary, fee-based financial planning firm serving federal government employees and retirees all over the country. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be taken as financial advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. The opinions expressed by our hosts are their own and do not reflect the views, policies, or position of Raymond James. Securities are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services, Inc. And now, here are your hosts. Dan Sipe serves as a branch manager for Raymond James Financial Services and Serving Those Who Serve. Ed Zerndorfer is our guest and federal benefits expert in the space.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the FedLife podcast. I am your host, Dan Sipe. Additionally, I'm the branch manager here at Serving Those Who Serve and Lee Sipe & Associates. I will begin, as I always do, by saying thank you. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen. And above all, thank you for your service to the government, to the country, to me, to everybody. You do not hear that enough, but you will always hear it here. The other thing you will always hear here is Ed Zerndorfer, the guru, is back with us once again as part of our ongoing mission to reach, teach, and serve you, the career civilian feds. Once again, we're following Ed's Fed Zone articles. You can find those on our site, fed-zone.com. Gives us one more way to reach and teach. And we're back with part 2 of our discussions about that dream goal that so many of our feds have. And that is that second home, that retirement home. And Ed's given us 3 great articles. It's a fantastic series digging into the retirement side of the conversation. I really, really, really encourage you to head over to the FedZone, fed-zone.com. Give them all a read. Okay, now, Ed, in your second article, you bring up something that probably nobody is thinking about when they're talking about their dream second home in a sunny clime or wherever, and that is estate planning considerations. So tell our listeners why that's an important topic here.
Well, Dan, yes, I always say everybody needs an estate plan. Where you're living. Now, if you move, you have to modify your estate plan. And I think the best way to explain this, Dan, is through an example. In my article, I have an example. I'd like to share that example. Read it to get a better idea of what I'm talking about. We have Howard. He's 68 years old. He recently retired from federal service. He has lived in Maryland for the past 40 years. He owns a condominium in Maryland, which he plans to keep, but is moving to Florida. In addition to changing his car registration, voter registration, and other indications of intent to establish residency in Florida, Howard intends to destroy his Maryland will and create a new will in his Florida county residence. Upon Howard's death, his will be filed for probate in Florida in his Florida county residence. This is the case no matter where Howard dies, in Florida or in Maryland. Now, I'm saying he still has that residence in Maryland. He has that condominium residence. So in his will, the estate attorney will probably have to check with a Maryland estate attorney how to incorporate the Maryland residence into his Florida will. But the most important thing is, if Howard dies in Florida, his will will be probated in Florida. If he's happening to be visiting in Maryland and he dies, again, he will be probated in Florida. So again, the reason Howard's doing this is because if he's going to establish legal residence in Florida, he has to do everything, changing his car registration, his voter registration, and his estate plan, because he is now a legal resident of Florida. Now, added to that is that there are some states in the country, Maryland's one of them, that has, it's called an estate tax. An estate tax. What is an estate tax? It's a tax on the value of what you own at the time of your death. The federal government has an estate tax. That estate tax, there's an exemption during 2024, the first $13.61 million of your estate is estate tax free. I don't think too many people have to worry about paying a federal estate tax. But the problem is the states that I think there are 12 states and District of Columbia that have estate tax, that have an estate tax. The Maryland has one of them. They have a $5 million estate tax exemption. In this day and age, it doesn't take much to come up with $5 million. Here, Howard may have a brokerage account that has, let's say, $1 to $2 million. He owes life insurance. Life insurance is included in the state when he dies. And think about like the TSP. How many individuals out there have a TSP account over $1 million? It doesn't. My point is that it doesn't take much to come up with a state of $5 million. If he's living in Florida, Florida has no estate tax. It has no inheritance tax. Maryland also has an inheritance tax. And once again, you want to make sure that when you pass away, that it takes the least amount of time to get those assets to your designated beneficiaries. And a will is one way, but trust is another way. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't update your will or your trust, it's going to cause problems. So it's very important to update your estate plan if you do establish a residence in another state.
Whew, holy moly. There is a lot to consider there. Great that you're bringing it up, though. Now, up next, we're going into your third article. And you open up with the need to consider financial management and planning around the reality of two complete residences. So what should our folks be thinking about here?
As you know, Dan, wherever you're living, or in a house, rent, you have expenses. If you have two residences, you can double the expenses. Because no matter if you're renting or owning in another state, you're going to have things like rent to pay. If you're owning, you have maintenance fees. You have maintenance fees. And particularly if you're owning, you bought something in the place, you have to have homeowners insurance and maintenance fees. Once again, when you are in retirement, I wouldn't say you are on a fixed income, because you do get cost of living adjustments on your at least on your CSRS and FERS annuities. But the fact of the matter is, you have twice as much in expenses. Sure. So you have to take that into consideration if you are living in another residence during retirement. I'd just like to go through some of these expenses in a little more detail here. What are some of these expenses associated with owning two residences? Transportation costs. If you're living in two different places, you have to maybe have two cars, and you have one car in each residence. You're paying for auto insurance and transportation between residences and so on. You got to take that in consideration. I mean, you're going from one residence to another. You're flying. If you're far enough away, you're obviously going to fly or take the train. That's going to be added expenses. Household expenses. You have to have furniture in both places. You have to clothes in both places. Supplies, dishes, utility costs. You're paying for two places. Housing costs. These are some things you got to consider if you own property. Property taxes. Homeowners insurance. I did a little research on homeowner insurance. By the way, homeowner insurance has gone up a lot over the past couple of years. Homeowner insurance, I think, went up for this coming year on average 22%. 22% homeowners insurance because of all the tornado, the floods and forests and fires out there in the West, hurricanes. But to consider this, suppose you live in one residence, I call it the North. You're living here in the northern part of the country for 8 months, and you go to the southern part of the country for 4 months, and you own a house, a condominium, and you're going to leave. Okay, you're going to be away from that condominium, that home or condominium in the southern part for 4 months. It's going to be vacant. It's going to be unoccupied. There are some insurance companies that will charge you more in order for home insurance because the place is vacant. Well, it's not occupied. Just in case, for security reasons, and somebody might break in there. damage it and so on because it's vacant. They're going to charge you more than homeowners insurance. You have to consider that. HOA fees, lawn care. If you have that southern residence, that lawn has to be mowed, leaves have to be raked, whatever. That's going to all be part of having that second residence. Security systems. You have to keep your security system on there all the time. You just can't turn it off. Property management, especially if you're renting a resident if you're going to be renting your residence while you're away, you have to have property management. A company will manage the property for you at a fee. So these are all added costs to housing. Here's one you may not think about. Pets. You're going to take your pet with you, your dog, your cat, to your winter residence, to your winter home. You have to register the pet. You have to board it if you go away, and there are transportation costs associated with the pet. Legal fees. It may be necessary to have legal counselor for both jurisdictions. You have to have a lawyer in each jurisdiction. Healthcare. They require, we talked about this in a previous podcast. I mentioned about your Medicare Advantage plan. If you're enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan, Medicare Advantage plans are not national. They're dependent on where you're living. Like the federal government, you have those federal retirees who enrolled in the Medicare Advantage plan, where they're living now, most of the year, they have a Medicare Advantage plan. And when they go south or, wherever they're going to have their second home, they're going to have to switch their Medicare Advantage plan to that area, that serves that area. Now, you can do that outside an open season because that's sort of a life event. You can change your plan. And the same thing if you're enrolled in Medicare A and B. You're not in a Medicare Advantage plan. You have a Medicare supplement plan, an FEHB plan that is unique to your area. You have to switch their plan, So these are ongoing expenses that are going to be that apply to both places. And you have to have some type of system to track everything. You got to be organized here. I call it leveraging technology.
Yep.
That's what I call it.
Yeah. And let's expand on that a little bit, but I'd be willing to bet most of our listeners, if they're dreaming about a second home, aren't thinking pets. So great pickup on that. So would you expand a little bit on what you mean by leveraging technology?
Yeah. Things like electronic banking, doing things online, as opposed to walking into a bank and make deposits. People still do that. They want to get to their teller. They want to sit down with the person at the bank, sit down and talk, some strategy, things like that. No, you can't do that if you're living in two residences. Everything has to be, it makes life so much easier. Same thing with brokerage. If you have a brokerage account. I know, Dan, you are a registered representative, I think, with Raymond James, and I'm sure you have many clients that are out of state. You're licensed to do business out of state. They don't come to see you. Everything is on, electronically, Zoom, things like that.
Yep.
Thing makes life so much easier. So
absolutely.
Some of the, I hate to say older folks, they're not used to this. I remember I've been in this tax business now close to 40 years, and I can remember when everything was paper, and then now all my entire tax practice is electronic, everything, electronic filing, electronic filing for years. And I remember I had one client, older client, he was in his early 80s, was organized, had prepared his tax organizer, everything was to the penny. And then when I broke the news to him, this is great, but I just want to mention to you that I'm going to be filing your return electronically. What? I don't trust it. No, it has to be a paper return. I said, I'm sorry, I don't do it anymore. I've got rid of paper. Yeah. It's safe. Don't worry. So he reluctantly agreed, and I filed this electronically. Direct deposits of his refund in the bank. He couldn't believe it, how quick it was. And then a week later, he calls you back and says, I'm a little disappointed. I said, why? What are you disappointed? Why didn't you do this years ago? Why did you just start now? So they learn quickly. So when you are living in two residences, and let's say you have a brokerage account, Sending documents via U.S. mail, to me, doesn't make any sense. It's slow, it's expensive. I don't want to degrade the U.S. Postal Service, but sometimes it's so unreliable. You have to get out of this mode. You got to bring yourself up to modern times here. Okay.
Lean into it. Okay, and so next, you wisely bring up that 2 states, 2 properties add complexity to one's life, so much so that there may be wisdom in getting some professional guidance in the build up the money to be able to do it side, and in the legal side of acquiring and owning that second dream home. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I definitely recommend that anybody who's thinking about buying, renting another residence in another state, please talk to a financial advisor. Talk to their accountant. Talk to their estate attorney. Talk to their broker. They have a broker about all the advantages and disadvantages of having a second residence. Run the numbers. We pointed out some of the expenses that are going to occur, when you have 2 residences. Think about everything. In my article, like I went over, all these things that you got to worry about when you go to a second residence in terms of registering for your pets and having another car and your upkeep of your second home. Will you be able to afford it in retirement? Costs are going up.
Sure.
The cost of living is going up. Inflation is here to stay. Yeah, it's come down, but in terms of realtor for retirees, I don't think it's come down. That's my opinion. It's not come down. Healthcare costs are going up on average for this. They're talking about next year, 9% more the healthcare costs in 2025. We're talking about what people have to pay for care. Way ahead of what the inflation rate is. Therefore, you have to take that into consideration. All these things here.
Sure.
Will you be able to afford it? Well, you definitely need advice from a financial advisor, some type of financial advisor, before you say, yes, I decided I'm going to move to a second residence. Along those lines, you got to think about what's going to happen at the end of this. You're discussing with your financial advisor a plan to have a second residence in your retirement. Well, that's great. So how long do you intend to have the second residence? Do you have a plan when you reach the point that you no longer can afford 2 residences? When you reach the point where you physically cannot be living in 2 residences? What are you going to do? For example, if you are a single person and you own 2 residences, just you, and you reach the point down the line where you can no longer live in either residence because you have to go to a nursing home or assisted living. What's going to be the plan here? If you are a married person, you and your spouse, and you're living in 2 residences, and let's say one of the spouses no longer can live there. They have to go to assisted living. They're going to need help. They need to have constant care. If you want to keep the 2 residences, you need the constant care to come to both residences. You're living 2 different states. These costs, I know. What is the plan here? Do you have what I call an exit plan? And the time to talk about an exit plan is not when you have to get out. It's at the beginning. You have to plan the whole thing out. I always say that retirement is not an event. It's it's a start of part of your life in which you're going to have to make decisions throughout that time. It's not for example, when you retire from a company, or you retire from the government, you retire from a private company, and then you reach age 65. What's the decision you have to make? Enrolling in Medicare. Do you want to enroll in Medicare? Then you have to make a decision. When do I enroll in Social Security? When do I sell my house? Should I sell my house and rent in the same area? Or maybe I want to spend the cold winters, in Florida. What do I do? Do I rent? Do I buy? These are all decisions made throughout retirement. But the decision regarding exit plan, when you have to make a decision that you're going to have to go out of one or both residences, at that point, you have to come up with some type of plan at the beginning when you have the ability to do so. You don't want someone else to make that decision.
Couldn't agree with you more, Ed. And folks, I know it seems like it kind of sucks the fun out of planning to buy the house, having a plan for letting go of the house, but it's absolutely right. Do it now. Do it now when you're thinking about it. Do it now when you're as sharp and as healthy and as clear as you're ever going to be. Folks, I cannot say it any clearer than this. There is only one Ed Zerndorfer. I don't think anybody else can go this wide and that deep on a topic. Ed's just another exceptional set of articles, sir. So once again, on behalf of our feds, thank you for being such a great
pleasure.
resource.
I encourage everyone to please read those 3 columns. There's Roman number 1, Roman number 2, Roman number 3. They're there on the website, www.fed-zone.com, www.fed-zone.com. It's there for the reading. Read it once, read it twice, as many times as you have to, but there's a lot of good information there about owning 2 residences in retirement.
Awesome stuff, Ed. Awesome. Well, folks, that's a wrap. We are Serving Those Who Serve. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Hit that button on YouTube and Spotify and share it with your friends and strangers. Heck, throw an enemy in there. You'll make a friend out of them once they listen to these. Don't forget those live webinars every single week. Just head over to the SWS website at swserve.com. You'll see the blue webinar button. Hover over it, click it. Whole menu is going to come up. Sign up for one, sign up for all. Ed will come to you, reach you where you are, teach you where you are, and serve you where you are. Sign up for one, sign up for all. Share that with your friends. They will thank you. Be sure to read Ed every single week, the Fed Zone. As he said, fed-zone.com. So for Ed, the crew at Serving the Serve, and me, Dan Sipe, I'm going to close out, I always do, by saying, good luck, Godspeed, and above all, remember, it's your Fed life, so make it a great one because you deserve it. Stay well, everybody. We are out.